Hey guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. Now in today's video, guys, it took me a while, but I'm going to be finally doing a full review for the newest entry in the Fast and Furious franchise, Fast X. And as you guys already know, after this full review, I'm going to be doing a re-ranking of the entire Fast and Furious franchise, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And one more thing, if you have any suggestions for movie-related content or stuff that's within the realm of what I do here on this channel, please let me know in the comment section down below. I'm trying to pump out content a little bit more frequently for you guys. And, you know, the reason why I haven't been uploading very frequently isn't necessarily because I'm super busy or anything like that. It's just because I don't watch movies frequently enough to, you know, get out movie reviews, every single week or multiple times a week. So if you have any suggestions for content, please let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll try to take as many suggestions as possible. But, getting on to this review, Fast X. So, I kind of had a short notice for this movie. Now, I already knew that they were going to be making 11 movies for a long time. I've known this since probably Fast 8, like Fate of the Furious, around there. I've known it before F9, I know that for sure. So, I've known it for a couple of years. But it was kind of a short notice that they were going to be releasing the movie this summer. So when they announced it, like February, March, I can't remember what. It was like late February, early March from what I can remember. I was like, oh, damn, it's coming sooner than I expected. But then I kind of figured, oh, they're probably going on a 2-year schedule. So they're going to have Fast X, and then 2 years later, they're going to have Fast 11 coming up. So a bit of a short notice, but I already knew that they were planning to make future Fast and the Furious movies, so it didn't come as a surprise that they were making another Fast and the Furious movie. But as far as hype for this movie goes, I was pretty excited for it, knowing that Jason Momoa is going to be the villain in this movie, and learning the plot. I was like, okay, I'll run with this. We'll see how it goes. And then the trailers came out, and I saw Jason Momoa's character and things like that, and I was instantly hooked on it. Just some of the one-liners that he was already doing in the trailer, and the things that he was saying, I was like, the dialogue's going to be goofy, but I'm definitely going to dig this one. So overall, I was pretty excited for Fast X. I know that some people had the mid-credit scene spoiled because there was like this news company or something like that spoiled the mid-credit scene. Luckily, I wasn't one of those people that got it spoiled. But just so you know, there is a mid-credit scene, and you know, just be wary that there are a lot of spoilers going out for it. So just try to avoid it as much as possible if you don't like spoilers or anything like that. So otherwise, getting on to this review. First, talking about some of the positives in this movie. First, let's talk about the new characters that are introduced in this movie. Of course, we got Jason Momoa as Dante. We got Ali Richardson. I don't know if that's the character's name or the actor's name. I forgot, but he's one of like the agents in this movie that's like working with the team. But he kind of like goes back and forth with his roles in this movie. And then last up, we got Brie Larson, who's also kind of helping out the family a little bit in this movie. And overall, first talking about Jason Momoa, probably obviously my favorite newest character into the franchise. I really loved his performance in this movie. Not only because it was really crazy, really over the top and things like that, but because it raised his motivation in this movie, raised the stakes in a way that we haven't had these high of stakes in a while in the Fast and Furious franchise. And so I'll get back to that in a minute, but talking about how crazy his character is in this movie, I'm sure if you've already watched reviews for this movie, you probably already heard people talk about this. He's like the Joker of the Fast and Furious franchise. He's throwing out these one-liners, he's, you know, cracking these jokes to himself and things like that, and he just doesn't care. He's very reckless, he's just blowing up cars here and there, and I really, really dug his performance in this movie. I haven't seen very many Jason Momoa movies, but seeing him in this movie, being able to go this over the top, I really, really dug it. So, to give you an example, there's a scene in this movie where he kills a person with a knife and literally twirls the knife around his finger like it's some kind of toy and licks it with his tongue in like one clean swipe. That's how over the top it gets with Jason Momoa. So overall, I really dug it. And like I said, it raised the stakes in this movie because he's so reckless. I've heard people compare this movie to Furious 7 with as far as the motivation goes for him, and I see what they mean. The thing that separates him from Jason Statham, though, is that Jason Statham was going after God's Eye, and there was all these different subplots that were going on and things like that. Whereas Jason Momoa, he's just out for good old revenge. You know, they killed his father in Fast Five. He's out there to finish the job that he, needed to finish all those years back. And so his sole purpose is to just split apart Dom's family. And so I really, really like that. I love how, there's not a piece of technology that they're trying to go after and things like that. He's just trying to tear the family apart. And that really, really helps with raising the stakes. And I'll say that they're the most, I'll say, presumed character deaths in this movie, because you know how the Fast and Furious franchise can be. But there are more than 2 character deaths in this movie, at least presumed for right now. We don't know, because obviously Fast 11 is going to act as like a part 2 to the Fast X. Yeah, there's quite a few deaths of characters that have been in the franchise before. That's all I'll say. I'm not going to spoil anything or anything like that. Obviously, we've had character deaths in the past with the Fast and Furious franchise, but most of those characters obviously have been brought back, and it's usually only 1 or 2 characters. In this movie, we got multiple characters, more than 2. That's all I'll say from there. But so I really like how Jason Momoa's character raised the stakes, and overall, I really dug his character. Ali Richardson, he's probably my least favorite addition to the franchise. We've already kind of had similar people to him in this franchise, where it's like this really, really buff dude who's like usually a sidekick to the villain and things like that. I think the main problem I have with him is they kind of go back and forth with his character as far as like what side he's on and things like that. And I really hate when they do that with certain characters. It's like, freaking pick a side, or else I'm just gonna be really annoyed with you. And then Brie Larson, which really, really surprised me. I know she kind of got a bad rep after Captain Marvel came out and all that kind of stuff. But I actually liked her in this movie. I think she did a good job in this movie and played a pretty good role. And I didn't really have any problems with her. So, yeah, as far as main characters go, I think they did a pretty good job. Yeah, nothing more to say there. All the other stuff is pretty much just stuff you can expect out of a Fast and Furious movie as far as like positives go. If you like the over-the-top action in this movie, you're going to get more of that, although it's not going to be anything you haven't seen yet. Most of the stuff that's in this movie, it's all stuff that you've already seen, which makes sense because I think the whole idea of this movie was that they were trying to go back to familiar locations in the franchise. They go back to Rio de Janeiro, obviously, London, Antarctica at a certain part of this movie. They haven't really done a whole lot there yet, but it's likely that they're going to continue in that area. But there's all these different areas that we've already been to, and so I think it kind of makes sense that they're not trying to, go to a different spot this time or one-up themselves again. So if you're one of those people that really, really digs the over-the-top action, you may be satisfied, but just know that it's not going to be anything you haven't seen yet. It's, these really long car chases or these one-on-one fights between people, that kind of stuff. The stuff we've already seen in the franchise many, many times. So if you like that over-the-top action, just so you know, there's nothing that's going to be more over-the-top than we've already seen, which I kind of like. I kind of like how they kind of stopped going for the sky is the limit thing, and they just kind of brought us back to all these original spots that we've been to before. So that's as far as that's pretty much it for the positives in this movie. Moving on to the mixed category, I guess I've kind of already said it. I don't really like what they do with some of the new characters in this movie, how they kind of go back and forth in this movie, and there's definitely a lot of plot armor, which, I mean, what do you expect? It's a Fast and the Furious movie. I feel like I'm just nitpicking at this point, but it really, really hangs heavily in this movie with the plot armor that some of these characters have, particularly with Dom Toretto, which is, it's obviously something that has been going on for a long time now. It's nothing new, but it's really really heavy in this movie. Another thing, this movie seems to really really lean heavily on the jokes, which, don't get me wrong, most of the jokes did land for me in this movie. It wasn't like there were constantly jokes in this movie and like only 50% landed for me. Most of them did. I just wish they weren't leaning so much on relying on jokes and banter for so much of the movie, especially when we're with, Rome and Ludacris and that group of people in this movie. It's just constantly just jokes and banter over and over and over again. And it just kind of gives me like MCU vibes with how often they're doing it. And so I wasn't a huge fan of that, but luckily most of it did land for me, and not a lot of it like undercut important action sequences or anything like that. So it wasn't, that's why I'm putting it in the mixed category, because it didn't really hurt the film for me. I just wish they didn't lean so heavily on the jokes in this movie, except when it was Jason Momoa. When Jason Momoa was joking around, it was so freaking funny. I loved every minute of it. So yeah, that's it just wasn't really negative for me, but I just wish they weren't leaning so heavily on that. And I think that's it for the mixed category. Getting on to the negative part of this movie. Some people were talking about the dialogue. I just want to get this out of the way. I don't really recall any scenes where the dialogue was kind of goofy or corny or anything like that. Or there wasn't any particular scenes where it was like, oh, that's so corny or whatever. Obviously, they always try to emphasize on the movie being about family and things like that. And so you're gonna have those scenes where they're talking about family and this and that kind of stuff. And we all know, we've heard it a million times. So it just sounds cornier and cornier every time they do it because of the amount of memes that have been made about it and stuff like that. And so I don't know. I'm not gonna really put that as a negative because it's something that has been in the franchise for a while now, and so I don't think I really need to talk about it much. What I do need to talk about, though, and I think the only the only negative that I can really think of right now, is that there are just way too many people in this movie. And again, this is another thing where it's already been a problem for, the past couple of movies, but it's built up so much that it really, really shows in this movie, because there are at least, I think, like 5 different subplots and moving parts to this movie going on that we spent time with a certain group, and then they'll cut off the group. Sometimes they'll cut off at a really, really good moment where you're like, oh, what's going to happen? And then they cut off, and we don't find out what happens till like 15, 20, 25 minutes later. And it's like, really? And even if it doesn't cut off at a bad moment, it's just like, okay, we're spending time with this group, and then we stop with them, we move on to the next set of groups, and then maybe 30 minutes later, on average, we're finally coming back to that group of people, and it's like, oh, wait, yeah, they're still doing that thing. And I could understand why they would have so many groups of people if it all close together really nicely and they were actually doing something important. There's so many groups in this movie where it's like, what the hell are they doing? Like, what are they trying to accomplish here? Are they just messing around, or are they actually trying to help the team out? So I don't know. I didn't really like how there were so many moving parts in this movie to where you're spending time with a certain group, and then you're coming back, you're forgetting about them and coming back a while later. And by the time you come back to them, you're like, oh yeah, you got to like remember that what was going on, because we were gone from that group of people for so long. So I didn't like how there were so many moving parts, and I knew this was gonna, this was already something that was a problem in F9, and in the installments before that, it wasn't as much of a problem, but over time, it's just, the family has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where there's just too many characters. There's too many characters to handle, And Jason Momoa says it in the trailer. He's like, "How do you choose the ones to say you save?" Like here's the thing about having such a big family and stuff like that. So I find it ironic that they have so many people, and they even say it in the trailer. And so yeah, that was a huge issue for me, is that there are just way too many moving parts, and a few of them did kind of close back to their original spot, but there's still some left behind, and so I'm worried that when it all finally does come together, it's like, well, what all is going to happen? What are they going to do? And so yeah, the family's just way too big. I've never really understood why they have to save every villain in the Fast and Furious franchise for them to now be a part of the family and redeem themselves now. Or they bring back every single freaking character. Like in F9, they're just like, well, you know what? Let's bring back Han back. We don't care if there was no way he survived. Let's just freaking bring him back for the heck of it. This is all family. Let's bring everybody back together. So there's just way too many characters in the in the family now for even a 2.5 hour movie to handle. I think this movie would have to be like over 3 hours to be able to handle the amount of like content that they have for the script. Basically, what I'm saying is that the movie's length is not big enough for the amount of material that they have in this movie, is what I'm trying to say. So that was the one big negative for me. I don't think there was really anything else. Like I said, with the mixed stuff and the dialogue and things like that, I feel like that's all stuff that we've already had for a long time in the franchise, and so I don't really feel like going into it too much, just because I feel like it would just be nitpicking at that point. But the issue with there being way too many moving parts, again, something that's been in the franchise before, but in this movie, it is really, really shown, and it's gotten worse and worse over time because they just keep adding more and more characters. Just one more positive I could mention about this movie before I do my rating is that, although there were a lot of moving parts to the movie, like I said, I did enjoy kind of the breaks that we had in between, like the important scenes with like the like actual important like groups and things like that. Like when we retreated back to like Ludacris and Rome and what's her name, Ramsey, like that group of people. I really like that for the banter. And then in this movie, John Cena, who's obviously Uncle Jacob in this movie, is teamed up with Little Brian in this movie, and so there's a lot of cute scenes with them in this movie and things like that. And I like how we kind of got the fun side of John Cena in this movie, whereas in F9, obviously, he was the main villain in that movie. So, although there were a lot of moving parts and things like that, and that was sort of an issue for me, I did kind of like some of the group's chemistry, and I think it worked well and things like that. And I think they did manage the groups pretty well and things like that. But I'm just worried that, maybe in Fast 11, it's just not gonna make sense when it all has to come together. And I'd rather them not have to have so many moving parts and subplots and things like that. So I hope I covered all the bases there. There's so much that I could talk about because it's such a freaking big family. But just giving this a rating out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes, I believe I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I think I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10. I feel like I would be wrong if I gave it any less or any more than that, so I'm just going to keep it at an 8 out of 10. Given all of the nitpicks and problems that I have with this movie, I think 8 out of 10 is a decent score for it. And so overall, this movie gets me really excited. I like Jason Momoa's performance. It gives you all of the stuff that you come for, while also having a few unexpected bonuses with, obviously, it having a cliffhanger at the end, being a part of a 2-part Fast and Furious movies, and obviously the higher stakes with characters dying and things like that. So, yeah, overall, it's going to give you the stuff that you've come for. If you've been in the franchise for a while and you really like that over-the-top action, I think you'll be satisfied for the most part. But if you're one of those people that kind of wants to see something different and things like that, as far as the action goes, you're not really going to see much different. But as far as the plot goes and the villain's plot goes, you're going to see some different stuff that I think you may like. I know everybody's going to like Jason Momoa's character, and I think that's what really, really heavily lifts this movie. I think without his character and his villain arc, I don't think this movie would be the same. We've had so many villains in the past where they're just the same, going after a high piece of technology. Sure, they may be really tough or something like that, but they're not much of a threat. They're kind of going after something that's not directly affecting the family, whereas Jason Momoa, like I said, is going directly after the family. So I'll stop rambling on. I'm giving this movie an 8 out of 10, and that's it for the review. Make sure you stay tuned for the re-ranking of the entire Fast and Furious franchise. Other than that, if you have any suggestions, give them to me in the comment section down below. Like and subscribe, guys, and I will see you next time.